situation to attack into. Fantasy has his troops set perfectly, so they're going to defend troops coming through that choke, and he's got his troops set perfectly on the high ground as well, so it'll be hard for him to move across that high ground. And look at this. There's still some mines over here. He's going to re-land the comsat station just to use the comsat. Comes in with a single dropship to try and take up some forces. He's going to move in on the ground as well. Kills that mine. Where are the rest of his forces, though? He attacked through that choke. No, man. Oh, my gosh. Taking tons of losses attacking into that choke, but he still has superior forces. It may not matter. He might just have sheer amounts of forces. He just may have more sheer amount of forces than Fantasy, and he does get in there and forces Fantasy to lift his command center or take some siege hits, and manages to force his way in there. SCV is running away, but Fantasy still has a lot of forces, and Flash lost more going through that choke than he really should have. Also, Flash's forces not in the best arc. The way his tanks are a little bit spread out there, so it'll be a little bit difficult for some of his tanks to defend there. Anyway, so Flash now moving in here. He's got to be careful because Fantasy's forces are up on that high ground. D-Matrixes the dropship to run in and try and drop some stuff on top of those siege tanks. Beautifully executed by Fantasy. Nicely done. He's going to clean up that low ground base. And I don't think he even took any forces off that top firing line to do it. So Flash is now, whoa, man, he had a huge army advantage, and he's given it up, attacking through that choke, and now losing those forces by a nice little counter drop on top of him by Fantasy. So the armies are pretty much evened up now. Fantasy not mining. Oh, we just saw some vultures running around. Are they going to go for some SCVs? They are going to be running in here, trying to run into the main. He plants some mines down. He's going to try and take out that one tank with some mines, and just look at the vultures glitch himself through that tank. Is he going to take it out? Yeah, he turns around to take out that tank. He's going to try and plant some mines outside of those factories, which could do very, very bad damage, but no. Instead, vultures pop out. So lucky for Fantasy, or perhaps well done by Fantasy. Anyway, Flash is now barreling down the middle of the map. He has moved his reinforcements. He still has a minor firing line over on the left to stop a counter push there, and he's instead going down the middle here. But again, he's got to be careful of crossing that bridge. Fantasy putting up some siege tanks and within range of that bridge. Several tanks within range of that bridge. Fantasy is very well defended that position. He's not going to be able. Flash is not going to be able to get there again. So Flash just saying, all right, you know what? You're going to go there. I'm going to go here. I'm going to attack where you're weak. Although Fantasy isn't really weak anywhere, though. There's a comsat by Flash trying to spot what's going on in that location. He kind of sieges and unsieges there for a strange moment. And Flash now is going to go in with everything. This is it. It is all or nothing on this attack. He's moving in with his SCVs as well. He's going to try and follow the SCVs up. Oh, the SCVs just getting slaughtered as they move in, but he's going to follow up with tons of tanks and Vulture's tanks sieging up. Goliath's in the mix as well. Those dropships are empty. They can't do much good except for taking hits from the Goliaths, but more tanks just barreling down this choke, this tiny choke point. Flash somehow managing to squeeze through there, and he's got to be careful of the forces on the high ground, though. He's got to set it up. He sieges up first. He's going to get the first round of siege hits, but no. Fantasy may have too many forces, and Flash's forces a little bit too far back. Fantasy setting his SCVs as well. Flash is at least going to force him to lift that command center. He's not going to take a commanding lead of that position, but he barely manages to kill that base. If he had not killed off that base and gotten it to lift, he would be gone right now. He would be dead. Well, you know, actually, I take that back. Maybe not, because Flash does have sort of 1.5 bases mining. I forgot about that mineral only that he has, so he's not screwed, actually, if he lost that. But he just used up a lot of troops. I mean, he put in a dozen SCVs and a ton of tanks. He lost a lot of stuff to take that position, and maybe it's because he realizes how important it is to Fantasy. He knows that that was Fantasy's basically his last mining base, except for a little bit of minerals left at 3 o'clock. And here he is. He's now pushing in with some Vulture support. He's got a much wider choke to move through here, so he's going to try and push in for the kill, and Fantasy trying to bring his forces back from that high ground, which is going to leave that vulnerable. Is Flash going to realize this and move his own tanks through the high ground? This will be an epic moment for him to unsiege those tanks and push across that plateau while Fantasy's forces are on the low ground. There's those tanks just sitting there. He needs to move them out, but at the very least, Fantasy's still contained, unable to push back and take that bottom left position. And where's Fantasy going to go? You know what? Fantasy's best option for a new base right now would be top right at this point. There's nowhere else he can go. He's mined out everywhere else nearby him. But here comes some vultures from Fantasy. He's going to try and wipe out SCVs, slow down Flash's mining. Flash's reinforcements are moving right through that location though at the moment. And oh, that's a really good idea too. Mining up that The excuse me, the whoa, nice mine there, taking ours out, and those SCVs are gonna have to run. And Flash is actually gonna pull back. Oh, Comsat going down is gonna save those tanks. What was I gonna say? Oh yes, mining up the route between the front line and his reinforcements. Very smart, very smart move there. And look at this, Flash pulling back his tanks that were on the high ground near Fantasy's base to clean up these vultures in his own base. Is now going to lose that high ground again, that he could have just pushed in and taken it all out and obliterated Fantasy. He didn't take that opportunity, and then he had to pull out of there, and so now he just has that low ground. At least Flash's forces in that bottom left corner are in a good position, that Fantasy had prior. Good for you know, attacking anything trying to go through that choke. So Fantasy has pretty firm control of that bottom left location, but you know. So actually, he has really good control. And look at this. They just showed that base. Fantasy is barely mining. He's only got a few SCVs mining. And Fantasy almost took out those SCVs with some nice drops and mines and what have you. But didn't quite pull it off. And Flash is still mining there. So Flash is now mining basically at one base. That mineral-only base. Fantasy, I don't think is mining at all. I mean, he's got a couple mineral stacks barely left at a couple bases there, but for the most part he's not mining. Flash is barely mining, but barely mining is better than no mining. And I think Flash is going to float that command center down to the bottom left base and try and take that or something like that. This is very close. Fantasy is not quite out of it yet. He's almost out of it though, but oh, loses a dropship. Oh no! Oh, this may be Fantasy's last hurrah, actually, sending these dropships to try and do some drops on Flash's main. He's just got minerals, and he's actually got some abandoned gas mines, so he's got some gas, and he's going to retake this position here. I don't know why Flash pulled out of that position. Well, actually, I do know why, because he wants to finish Fantasy off now. Anyway, he's puts his tanks in a really nice position there, but Flash just has too many forces left. This is going to be GG any second now. 3, 2... 1, 0. Okay, I'm wrong. But anyway, Flash has taken this game. There's no way Fantasy can come back into this now. That was his last hurrah. I thought he had more mining than he did. He doesn't. He's just right now hoping that Flash isn't mining at all either, and he's just hoping to distance mine. But Fantasy, I think, knows that he's pretty screwed. He's setting his SCVs distance mining up to that top right base. Did I just see a Marine? Has that been Marine just been chilling for the entire game? Anyway, so Flash keeping control of that bottom left, forcing Fantasy out of there. Fantasy was going to try and move in there. That was like his last group of troops. He was going to try and secure it so he could mine that bottom left. Failed to, and that was pretty much it. And unfortunately, Fantasy didn't GG when I made my cool hip countdown, because that would have been pretty slick if I'd been able to count down. Anyway, alas, I am not slick. Fantasy is distance mining. Almost said distance is Fantasy mining. Now distance mining that top right base. Flash with some mineral intake, able to make some vultures to try and block that position. Fantasy has nowhere left he can go now. His last chance would basically be to use whatever's in those dropships to kill those vultures in the top left, and continue distance mining there. But I don't think that's going to happen. I have no idea what he's got in those dropships, but he just needs to get out of the game now. Anyway, this is a best of 5, by the way. MSL best of 5 up to, I think, the round of 8 onwards. There's the GG finally coming from Fantasy. Wow! And that was, I gotta hand it to Fantasy, epically played. Fantasy gave Flash a run for his money, which is extremely difficult to do. It is extremely difficult to even stay in a game with Flash TVT for, you know, 20 or 30 minutes. And Fantasy just forced it to a 40-minute game is what it looks like, or a 40-minute game, something along those lines. But Flash taking the win for game 1 in spectacular fashion. That was an absolutely ridiculous game, back and forth, and it stayed mech the whole time. No BC switch at any point. They were just they never really had the money to spare. There was so much back and forth. Neither player had enough of a secure position to make the BC switch. So ended up just being tank, Goliath, Vulture, dropship the entire time. and Flash just barely pulling out a couple wins, and it really just came down. Fantasy had the advantage, and it came down to Fantasy just making a couple misdrops where he was dropping on Flash's sieged forces and didn't drop on the sieged tanks. He didn't drop on top of them. He dropped near them, allowing Flash's siege tanks to unhinderedly attack his own forces as they were dropping out of the dropships. And that's why Fantasy lost a couple of those battles. And if things had gone a little bit differently, if those dropships had landed in a little different location, then you know, things could have gone very differently. But they didn't, and so Flash takes the win, and there's Fantasy having some green tea, it looks like, in preparation for Game 2. So yes, wow, man, if this could be as many as 5 TVTs in a row. That could be tons and tons of games. I'm going to try and do as much of them as I can. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This is Game 1 of a best of 5. So I'm going to move on, and I'm actually going to load up the video, let it queue up, and play a few StarCraft 2 games while it queues up on YouTube, and then come back and cast Game 2 a little bit later. Yeah, so again, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. GG.